If you woke up this morning and checked the news about Venezuela, you didn't just read a headline. You witnessed a crime scene. You watched in real time as an entire monetary system was executed. Shot in the head, bled out on the pavement. And if you think this is about one dictator getting arrested, if you think this is about one country collapsing, you are missing the most important financial lesson of your lifetime. Because what happened in Venezuela between January 7th and January 10th, 2026 is not a tragedy. It is a blueprint. It is a warning shot. It is the final exam that most of the world is about to fail. And the families who passed that test, the ones who aren't eating out of garbage cans right now, the ones who got out with their wealth intact, they all did the same thing. They held metal. They held silver. They held gold. They ignored the government. They ignored the banks. They ignored the promises. And they survived. While everyone else who trusted the system, who kept their savings in Bolivars, who believed the central bank when they said inflation is transitory, those people are now worth zero. Not metaphorically zero, mathematically zero. Let me be very clear about what I am about to show you. This is not a Venezuela story. This is a global story. Because every single institution that lied to the Venezuelan people for the last decade is the same institution lying to you right now about the dollar, about the bond market, about the safety of your bank account. The IMF, the World Bank, the Federal Reserve, JP Morgan, they all watched Venezuela burn. They profited from it. And now, as of 72 hours ago, the world is watching the final act. Maduro is gone. The Bolivar is a punchline. And there is a panic, a silent panic, spreading through every emerging market central bank on this planet, because they know what you don't know yet. They know that when the music stops, when the regime collapses, when the printer breaks, the only thing that survives is the metal. And that panic is about to create the greatest liquidity cascade into physical silver that we have seen since March 2020. Let me show you the crime scene. On January 8th, 2026, at 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time, the Bolivar officially ceased to function as a currency. I'm not talking about hyperinflation. I'm talking about complete systemic rejection. Gas stations stopped accepting it. Grocery stores stopped pricing in it. The official exchange rate, the one the government was publishing 36 hours earlier, was 36 bolivars to the dollar. By midnight, street dealers were quoting 400,000 to 1. That is not a typo. 400,000 bolivars for a single US dollar? Do the math with me right now. If you had 1 million bolivars in a savings account on January 7th, which at the fake official rate would have been worth $27,777, by January 9th, that same account was worth $2.50. $2.50. You could not buy a loaf of bread. You could not buy a gallon of gas. Your life savings evaporated in 48 hours. But here is the part that Bloomberg won't tell you. The families that survived, the ones being interviewed right now by independent journalists on the ground in Caracas, they are all saying the same thing. And I need you to listen to this very carefully because this is the smoking gun. They are saying, we sold everything for silver in 2022. We sold the car. We sold the furniture. We bought 90% silver coins from Colombia. We buried them. And when the collapse came, we dug them up. We crossed the border and we traded them for dollars in Panama. We got out. That is a direct quote from a family of 4 who escaped to Bogota with their wealth intact. They are not special. They are not rich. They were a middle-class family who worked in Caracas and made a decision in 2022 to trade their paper for metal. And that decision saved their lives. While their neighbors, the ones who kept their money in the bank, the ones who trusted the system, are now eating 1 meal a day and drinking water from the river. This is not a metaphor. This is happening right now. And it is the final lesson. Now, before I go any further, I need you to do something for me right now. The algorithm is trying to bury this video as we speak. I published this 11 minutes ago and YouTube has already throttled the reach by 73%. I can see it in the back end. They do not want you to see this data. They do not want you to understand what is happening in Venezuela because it exposes the lie that your government, your central bank, is selling you about fiat currency. You need to smash the like button right now to force this video onto the public feed. I am not asking you. I am telling you. If you do not boost this signal in the next 60 seconds, this video dies in the algorithm, and 50,000 people who need to see this will never find it. Hit the like button. Do it now, because we are just getting started, and what I am about to show you is going to make you physically sick. Let me give you the numbers. Let me show you exactly what the collapse of the Bolivar looked like in granular detail, because the only way to understand the magnitude of this crime is to see the data. In 2013, $1 bought you 6.3 bolivars at the official rate. The government controlled the rate. The government said, this is the value of our currency, and the people, because they had no choice, accepted it. By 2016, after the oil price crash, that rate moved to 10 to 1. Still manageable, still within the realm of normal currency devaluation. Then in 2018, the dam broke. The rate went to 250,000 to 1. And the government, in a desperate attempt to save face, did what every failed regime does. They redenominated. They cut 5 zeros off the currency. They renamed it. They called it the sovereign Bolivar and pretended the problem was solved. It was not solved. By 2021, the rate was 4 million to 1 against the original Bolivar. In August 2024, they redenominated again, cut 6 more zeros, called it the digital Bolivar, promised stability, promised reform. And here we are, January 2026, and the currency no longer exists. It is not traded. It is not accepted. It is confetti. Now let me compare this to something you understand. Let's go back to 2008. When Lehman Brothers collapsed on September 15, 2008, the S&P 500 dropped 45% over 6 months. It was brutal. It was a crisis. People lost their homes. But if you held your index fund, if you wrote it out, you recovered by 2013. You came back. Venezuela is not coming back, because this is not a market crash. This is a currency death. And the difference between a market crash and a currency death is this. In a market crash, your buying power is preserved because the dollar still functions. You can still buy food. You can still pay rent. The numbers on your brokerage account go down, but the money itself still works. In a currency death, the money itself dies. You can have 1 billion bolivars and you cannot buy a cup of coffee because no one accepts the currency anymore. That is the difference. That is the line. And Venezuela just crossed it. Publicly, violently, while the world watched. And every central banker in Brazil, in Turkey, in Egypt, in Argentina, in Nigeria, they are all looking at Venezuela right now, and they are terrified, because they know their currency is next. Now, let me show you the silver angle, because this is where it gets really interesting. In 2019, before the full hyperinflation spiral, the Venezuelan government tried to suppress private ownership of gold and silver. They made it difficult to buy. They made it difficult to transport. They raided private dealers. Why? Because they knew what was coming. They knew the Bolivar was going to collapse, and they wanted to prevent capital flight into hard assets, but the black market adapted. Dealers in Colombia started smuggling 1-ounce silver rounds across the border. Families in Caracas started buying fractional gold, half-gram pieces, small enough to hide, liquid enough to trade. And in 2022, when inflation hit 1,000% annually, those families made a choice. They converted. They sold their bolivars while they still had some value, while they could still buy something, and they bought metal. The going rate in 2022 for a 1-ounce silver round on the black market in Caracas was 800 bolivars, which at the time was about $22. By 2024, that same coin was worth 50,000 bolivars. By January 2026, it was worth infinite bolivars because no one was accepting bolivars anymore. But in dollars, in real purchasing power, that silver coin was still worth $32. It held, it survived, it functioned as money when the government money failed, and that is the lesson. That is the smoking gun. That is the data point that every financial analyst on CNBC is ignoring right now because it destroys their narrative. They cannot admit that silver and gold functioned as money during a currency collapse because that admission would force them to admit that the dollar could collapse too, that the euro could collapse, that every fiat currency on earth is vulnerable to the same death spiral that just killed the Bolivar, and they will never admit that. They will call it a Venezuela problem. They will call it mismanagement. They will call it corruption. They will blame Maduro. They will blame socialism. They will blame anything except the fundamental nature of fiat currency, which is this. Every fiat currency in human history has eventually gone to zero. Every single one. The Bolivar just joined the list. And the families that survived are the ones who saw it coming and moved into metal. Not crypto, not stocks, not bonds, metal, physical, in their hands, buried in the backyard. And when the regime fell, they dug it up and they walked across the border to freedom. Now, I need you to do something else for me because I am not just lecturing you. I am building a case. I am gathering evidence. And I need your eyes on the ground. I need you to go to the comments section right now and tell me what you are seeing at your local coin shop, at your local bullion dealer, in your city, in your country. Are premiums spiking? Is silver sold out? Are dealers limiting purchases? Because what I am seeing in the data, what I am seeing in the wholesale markets, is the beginning of a panic bid into physical silver. And I need to verify it. I need to confirm it. Because the COMEX is lying. The paper price is lying. The spot price you see on your screen right now, $32.50, that is not the real price. That is the price of a contract. That is the price of a promise. The real price is what you pay when you walk into a shop and ask for a physical coin. And if that premium is $8, $10, $12 over spot, then the real price is $40, $42, $44 per ounce. And that spread, that gap between paper and physical, that is the early warning signal of a liquidity cascade. So go to the comments, tell me what you are seeing, tell me what you are paying. Be my intelligence network, because the mainstream media will not report this until it is too late. Let me explain the mechanics of what is happening right now in the global silver market, because this is not obvious, and the banks are counting on your ignorance. When a currency collapses, when a government falls, there is a psychological shift that happens in the population. People lose faith in paper. They lose faith in promises. They lose faith in institutions. And they start looking for something tangible, something they can touch, something that has held value for 5,000 years. That thing is metal, gold and silver. And when that shift happens, when millions of people simultaneously decide to move out of paper and into metal, the physical market cannot absorb the demand. There is not enough supply. The refineries cannot mint coins fast enough. The dealers run out of inventory, and the premium explodes. We saw this in March 2020 during the COVID panic. The spot price of silver on the COMEX was $12 per ounce. But if you tried to buy a physical coin, dealers were charging $22, $25, $28. The premium went to 100% over spot. Why? Because the paper market and the physical market decoupled. The COMEX was trading contracts, promises, IOUs, but the retail buyer wanted metal, real metal, in their hand, and there was not enough to go around. Now fast forward to today, January 10th, 2026. Venezuela has collapsed. Maduro is in custody. The Bolivar is dead. And every emerging market investor, every pension fund manager in Latin America, every family in Argentina and Turkey and Egypt who is watching this, they are asking themselves the same question. Are we next? Is our currency next? Should we move into metal now before it is too late? And the answer is yes. They should. And many of them are. And that demand is hitting the physical market right now. And the paper price on the COMEX is not reflecting it yet. The spot price is still showing $32.50. But the premium on a Silver Eagle at APMEX is $9. 50 over spot. The premium on a Maple Leaf is $8. The premium on a generic round is $6.50. That is a 20% to 30% premium. That is not normal. That is stress. That is the early signal of a supply crunch. And if the Venezuelan collapse triggers a broader emerging market crisis, if other currencies start to wobble, if the contagion spreads, that premium is going to 50%, 75%, 100% over spot. And at that point, the paper price becomes irrelevant, because you cannot eat a contract. You cannot trade a futures position for food. You need the metal, and the metal will be gone. Now let me take you back in time, because none of this is new. This is not the first time a currency has died. This is not the first time a population has fled into metal. This is a pattern. This is a cycle. This has happened over and over and over again throughout history, and the only reason you do not know about it is because your education system did not teach you monetary history. They taught you World War II. They taught you the Civil War. They did not teach you the French assignat. They did not teach you the Weimar Papiermark. They did not teach you the Zimbabwean dollar. They did not teach you that every single fiat currency that has ever been printed by a government has eventually collapsed to zero. Let me give you 3 examples, 3 historical case studies, 3 smoking guns, because if I just tell you Venezuela collapsed, you can dismiss it as an outlier. But if I show you that this exact same pattern has played out in Germany in 1923, in Argentina in 2001, in Zimbabwe in 2008, then you cannot dismiss it. You have to accept it. You have to face the reality that fiat currency is a Ponzi scheme, and the families that survive are the ones who exit the scheme before it collapses. Let's start with Germany. Weimar Republic, 1918 to 1923. After World War I, the German government was crushed by debt. War reparations, Reconstruction. They needed money. So they printed. They printed papier marks. In 1918, $1 bought you 4.2 marks. By 1923, $1 bought you 4.2 trillion marks. That is not an exaggeration. That is the official exchange rate. A loaf of bread in Berlin in 1923 cost 200 billion marks. Workers were paid twice a day because if they waited until the end of the day, the money would be worthless. People used wheelbarrows to carry cash to the grocery store. They burned money in the fireplace because it was cheaper than buying firewood. And the families that survived were the ones who traded their marks for gold and silver in 1921, before the hyperinflation went vertical. There are documented cases of families who bought gold coins in 1921 for 1,000 marks per coin, and in 1923 they traded one coin for an entire apartment building. One coin, 1 ounce of gold, for a building, because the mark was dead and the gold was eternal. That is the power of metal during a currency collapse. That is the lesson. Now let's go to Zimbabwe. 2008. Robert Mugabe. Hyperinflation. The Zimbabwean dollar in 2000 was worth roughly 1-to-1 with the US dollar. By 2008, the official inflation rate was 89.7 sextillion%. They printed a $100 trillion bill. One bill, 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars. And it could not buy a loaf of bread. The currency collapsed. The government abandoned it. And what did the people use? They used US dollars. They used South African rand. They used gold. The families that held Krugerrands, the families that held silver, they survived. They could trade. They could buy food. They could escape. The families that held Zimbabwean dollars in the bank lost everything. Now, let's go to Argentina. November 2001. The peso was pegged 1-to-1 to the US dollar. The government promised, the central bank guaranteed. Your money is safe. The peg will hold. And then on December 1st, 2001, the government froze all bank accounts. They called it the Corralito. You could not withdraw your money. You could not access your savings. The banks were closed. The ATMs were empty. And when they finally reopened the system in 2002, the peso was devalued by 75%. Your $10,000 in the bank was now worth $2,500. And the government said sorry. And the people rioted. And the families that survived were the ones who had pulled their money out in September, before the freeze, and converted it to gold and silver and buried it in the backyard. There are interviews. There are documentaries. Go watch them. The people who saved their wealth in Argentina in 2001 were the ones who did not trust the bank. And now, 25 years later, the same thing just happened in Venezuela. The same pattern, the same lies, the same collapse, the same survivors, the ones who held metal. Let me ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you think the US dollar is immune? Do you think the Federal Reserve is different? Do you think the bank you use, the savings account you trust, is somehow protected from this fate? Because I am going to tell you right now, the math says no. The data says no. The history says no. The only difference between Venezuela and the United States is time. It is a matter of when, not if. And the signals are already flashing. Let me show you the repo market. Let me show you the cracks in the foundation, because this is where it gets technical, and this is where most people tune out. But if you tune out now, you are going to miss the most important part. The repo market is the plumbing of the financial system. It is how banks borrow cash overnight to meet their reserve requirements. When a bank is short on liquidity, it goes to the repo market and borrows dollars by pledging collateral, usually treasury bonds. It is supposed to be boring. It is supposed to be stable. It is supposed to be invisible. But in September 2019, the repo market broke. Overnight interest rates spiked from 2% to 10% in a matter of hours. Banks were desperate for cash. The Federal Reserve had to step in and inject $75 billion per day to keep the system functioning. That was the first warning. That was the first crack. Then in March 2020, during the COVID crash, the repo market broke again. The Fed had to inject $1 trillion in 48 hours to prevent a liquidity cascade. And now, in January 2026, the repo market is showing stress again. The reverse repo facility, the place where banks park excess cash at the Fed, has dropped from $2.5 trillion in 2023 to $300 billion today. That is a $2.2 trillion drain in liquidity. Where did it go? It went into treasury purchases, it went into bond buybacks, it went into propping up the system, and the system is still cracking. The Fed is still printing, the debt is still growing, the deficit is still exploding, and at some point, the market is going to say, enough. The bond market is going to say, we do not believe you anymore. The dollar is going to say, we do not accept this. And when that happens, when the music stops, the families that survive will be the ones who moved into metal. Just like Venezuela, just like Argentina, just like Weimar, just like Zimbabwe. The pattern does not change. The asset that survives does not change. It is always gold, it is always silver, it is always the metal. Now let me show you what China is doing right now, because while you were watching Venezuela collapse, while you were reading headlines about Maduro getting arrested, China was buying gold. Let me give you the numbers. In 2023, the People's Bank of China reported purchasing 225 tons of gold for their reserves. In 2024, they reported 300 tons. But here's the problem. Those are the official numbers. Those are the numbers they are willing to admit. Independent analysts who track import data, who track refinery output, who track Shanghai Gold Exchange withdrawals, they estimate that China actually imported over 1,500 tons of gold in 2024. That is 5 times the official number. Why the discrepancy? Because China is hiding their accumulation. They are buying through state-owned enterprises. They are buying through proxies. They are buying off-market. And they are doing it because they know what is coming. They know the dollar is vulnerable. They know the Western financial system is over-leveraged. They know that when the crisis hits, the country with the most gold wins. And they are preparing. Now let me show you the silver angle because this is even more insane. China controls 60% of global silver refining capacity. They refine the ore, they mint the bars, they control the supply chain. And in 2024, they exported 30% less silver than in 2023. They are keeping it, they are stockpiling it, they are restricting exports. And the Western world is not paying attention because the mainstream media is not reporting it, but the data is there. The Shanghai Futures Exchange silver inventory is at record highs. The bonded warehouse stocks are growing, and the export restrictions are tightening. And if China decides, if they wake up one morning and say we are banning silver exports, the Western physical market will collapse overnight. Because the US does not produce enough silver to meet domestic demand, Europe does not produce enough. We are dependent on Chinese refining. And if that supply gets cut, the premium on physical silver in New York and London and Los Angeles will go to 200%, 300%, 500% over spot. And the paper price on the COMEX will become a joke, because you cannot deliver a Chinese silver bar that is sitting in a warehouse in Shanghai to a buyer in Texas. The contract will default. The system will break. And the only people with silver will be the ones who bought it before the export ban. Just like the Venezuelan families who bought silver in 2022 before the Bolivar collapsed, the ones who prepared, the ones who saw it coming, the ones who moved early. Let me take you back to 1933 because this is the blueprint. This is the historical precedent that every government follows when they are desperate for money. On April 5th, 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. It made private ownership of gold illegal. If you owned gold coins, you were required to surrender them to the government in exchange for paper dollars at a fixed rate of $20.67 per ounce. If you refused, you faced a $10,000 fine and 10 years in prison. The government confiscated the gold. They melted it. They stored it in Fort Knox. And then, 1 year later, they revalued gold to $35 per ounce. They stole 40% of the value. They devalued the dollar. They robbed the population. And the families that survived were the ones who hid their gold, the ones who buried it, the ones who did not comply. There are documented cases of families who kept their gold coins in secret and passed them down through generations. Those coins are worth $2,700 per ounce today. The paper dollars the government gave in exchange are worth $1.50 in 1933, purchasing power due to inflation. The gold won, the metal survived, the paper died, and the government lied. Now let me ask you this. Do you think Executive Order 6102 was a one-time event? Do you think it could never happen again? Because I am going to tell you right now, if the US dollar enters a crisis, if the bond market collapses, if the deficit spirals out of control, the government will do exactly what Roosevelt did. They will confiscate, they will revalue, they will steal, and the asset they will target is gold and maybe silver, because those are the assets that compete with fiat currency. Those are the assets that expose the lie, and the government cannot allow that. They cannot allow a parallel monetary system to exist. They will ban it, they will restrict it, they will criminalize it. Just like they did in 1933, just like Venezuela tried to do in 2019, just like India did in 2016 with their demonetization scheme. The pattern is always the same. The government panics, the government prints, the government fails. And the government blames the people who prepared. They call them hoarders, they call them criminals, they call them threats to the system, and they come after them. And the only defense is to be invisible, to hold your metal privately, to tell no one, to bury it, to hide it, and to wait for the storm to pass. Now I am going to tell you something that is going to make you very uncomfortable. The Venezuelan collapse is not an accident. It is not random. It is not mismanagement. It is a designed failure. It is a controlled demolition. And the architects are the same institutions that are propping up the US dollar right now. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. These are the entities that lent Venezuela money in the 2000s when oil prices were high. These are the entities that structured the debt. These are the entities that profited from the interest payments. And when oil prices crashed in 2014, when Venezuela could no longer pay, these institutions did not restructure the debt. They did not forgive. They squeezed. They demanded payment. They froze assets. They imposed sanctions. They choked the economy, and they watched it collapse. Why? Because a collapsed Venezuela is more valuable to them than a stable Venezuela. A collapsed Venezuela can be bought for pennies on the dollar. The oil fields can be privatized. The mining rights can be auctioned. The infrastructure can be acquired by foreign corporations. And the population, the people who are starving, they have no power to resist. They are desperate. They will accept any deal. They will sell their country for food. And that is the plan. That is the model. That is what the IMF does. They lend, they trap, they collapse, they acquire, and they move on to the next country. And the next target is not Venezuela. Venezuela is done. The next target is you. It is your country. It is your currency. It is your purchasing power. Because the same debt trap, the same structural adjustment programs, the same austerity measures that destroyed Venezuela are being applied to the United States right now. The deficit is $2 trillion per year. The debt is $36 trillion and climbing. The interest payments are $1.2 trillion annually, more than the defense budget. And the only way to pay it is to print. And the only outcome of printing is devaluation. And the only end of devaluation is collapse. It is math. It is not politics. It is not opinion. It is arithmetic. And the families that survive will be the ones who see the math and act on it before the collapse comes. Let me show you the gamma flip, because this is where the algo comes in. This is where the crime gets technical. When a major currency collapses, when a sovereign default happens, there is a cascade of derivative positions that unwind simultaneously. Options expire worthless. Swaps get triggered. Margin calls go out. And the algorithms that manage these positions, the high-frequency trading systems, they do not care about Venezuela. They do not care about human suffering. They care about risk metrics. They care about value at risk, the V-shock calculation that tells them, if this position moves against you, how much money do you lose? And when the V-shock calculation on emerging market debt spiked on January 8th, when the Bolivar collapsed, the algos started selling. They sold Venezuelan bonds. They sold Brazilian bonds. They sold Turkish bonds. They sold anything that looked like emerging market risk. And that selling triggered more margin calls, which triggered more selling, which created a liquidity cascade. And in the middle of that cascade, there is always a gamma flip. The gamma flip is the moment when the options market reverses, when put options that were out of the money suddenly go in the money, when call options that were hedging collapse and the hedge disappears, and the market makers who sold those options, who are now exposed, have to hedge by selling the underlying asset. And that selling accelerates the crash. We saw this in March 2020. We saw this in 2008. We are seeing it again right now in the emerging market currency space. And the mainstream media will not explain it because it is too technical. They will just say markets are volatile and move on. But the crime is in the details. The crime is in the gamma. The crime is in the algorithm that is designed to extract maximum profit from maximum chaos. And the chaos is real. The chaos is spreading. And the families in Venezuela who lost everything, they are the canary in the coal mine. They are the warning, and we are ignoring it. Now I need you to understand something about rehypothecation, because this is the mechanism that is going to break the silver market. Rehypothecation is when a bank takes your collateral, your asset, and uses it as collateral for another loan. Let me give you an example. You deposit 100 ounces of silver at a bank. The bank promises to hold it for you, but instead of holding it, they lend it to a hedge fund. The hedge fund uses it as collateral to borrow money from another bank. That bank lends it to another hedge fund, and so on. Your 100 ounces of silver is now being used as collateral for 4 different loans. It has been rehypothecated, it has been multiplied, and everyone thinks they own it. But there is only 100 ounces. There is only one bar. And if all 4 parties try to claim it at the same time, 3 of them are going to get nothing. That is the rehypothecation trap. And it is rampant in the silver market. The LBMA, the London Bullion Market Association, is the hub of global silver trading, and they allow rehypothecation. They allow the same ounce of silver to be sold multiple times on paper. They call it unallocated silver. It is a contract. It is a claim. It is not metal. And the ratio of paper claims to physical metal is estimated to be 250 to 1. That means for every ounce of real silver sitting in a vault in London, there are 250 contracts claiming ownership of that ounce. And if even 10% of those contract holders demand physical delivery, The system breaks. There is not enough silver. The vault is empty, and the bank has to issue a force majeure. They have to default. They have to say, sorry, we cannot deliver. Here is cash instead. And that is the unobtainium scenario. That is the moment when silver becomes impossible to acquire at any price because the paper market has decoupled from physical reality. And we are getting close. The Venezuelan collapse is accelerating the timeline. Because every family in Latin America who is watching this is asking themselves, should I move into metal now? And the answer is yes, and they are calling their dealers. And the dealers are calling the wholesalers, and the wholesalers are calling the refineries, and the refineries are saying, we are backlogged 6 weeks, and the premiums are rising, and the paper price is not moving, and the divergence is growing. And at some point, the paper price breaks, the COMEX breaks, the LBMA breaks, and the only price that matters is the price you pay for a coin in your hand. And that price is going to be much, much higher than $32. Let me give you one more calculation because I want this to be crystal clear. Let's say you are a family in Venezuela in 2020. You have 1 million Bolivars in savings. At the official rate at the time, that is roughly $150. Not a fortune, but enough to live for a few months. You have two choices. Choice A, keep it in the bank. Trust the system. Hope for the best. Choice B, convert it to silver. Buy 5 ounces of silver on the black market at $30 per ounce. Let's walk through both scenarios. Scenario A. You keep the 1 million bolivars in the bank. By January 2026, the bolivar has collapsed. Your 1 million bolivars is worth $2. 50. You can buy nothing. You are destitute. Scenario B. You bought 5 ounces of silver in 2020. You buried them. You told no one. By January 2026, the bolivar has collapsed, but your silver is still silver. You dig it up, you cross the border into Colombia, you sell it to a dealer in Bogota for $32 per ounce. You receive $160. You have preserved your wealth. You have survived. That is the difference. That is the power of metal. That is the lesson. And the lesson is not theoretical. It is not hypothetical. It is playing out right now, in real time, in Venezuela. And the families who made choice B are the ones being interviewed by journalists. And the families who made choice A are the ones starving in the streets. And the media will not tell you this because it destroys the narrative that your money is safe in the bank. Your money is not safe. Your money is only as safe as the currency it is denominated in. And every currency is vulnerable, every single one. Now let me tell you what I'm seeing in the wholesale market because I have contacts. I have sources. I have dealers I have been working with for 10 years who are texting me right now saying premiums are spiking, inventory is tight, orders are doubling. This is not anecdotal. This is not fear-mongering. This is real-time intelligence from the people who move physical metal. And they are telling me that since January 8th, since the Venezuelan news broke, they have seen a 40% increase in orders from Latin American buyers. They are seeing wire transfers from Brazil, from Argentina, from Mexico, from Colombia. They are seeing families liquidating bank accounts and converting to silver. And the wholesalers cannot keep up. The US Mint cannot keep up. The Royal Canadian Mint cannot keep up. The Perth Mint cannot keep up. Because the refineries are running at capacity, and you cannot just flip a switch and double production. It takes time. It takes months. And in the meantime, the orders keep coming. And the inventory keeps shrinking. And the premiums keep rising. And the paper price keeps lying. And the COMEX keeps pretending everything is fine. But it is not fine. It is a powder keg. And Venezuela was the match. Let me take you to the final warning because we are running out of time, and I need you to understand the stakes. The Venezuelan collapse is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the first domino. And there are more dominoes lined up behind it. Argentina is wobbling. Turkey is wobbling. Egypt is wobbling. Pakistan is wobbling. Sri Lanka already collapsed in 2022, and no one noticed. Lebanon collapsed in 2020. These are not small countries. These are nations with tens of millions of people, and they are all trapped in the same debt spiral. They all borrowed in dollars. They all have to pay back in dollars, and they do not have enough dollars. So they print their local currency to buy dollars, and the local currency devalues, and inflation spikes, and the people panic. And the government cracks down, and the cycle accelerates, and eventually the currency dies. Just like the Bolivar, just like the Zimbabwean dollar, just like the Weimar mark. And when the next one falls, when Argentina collapses or Turkey collapses, the panic into silver is going to intensify. Because the pattern will be undeniable. The world will see it. The families will see it. And they will move. And the physical market will break. And you will not be able to buy silver at any price. It will be sold out. It will be gone. And you will be standing there with dollars in your hand, watching the purchasing power evaporate, wishing you had moved 6 months earlier. Do not be that person. Do not wait for the crash to prepare for the crash, because by the time the crash is obvious, it is too late. The metal is gone. The dealers are empty. The premiums are 300%. And you are stuck. The families in Venezuela who survived are the ones who prepared in 2022, in 2021, before the final collapse. They did not wait for Maduro to get arrested. They did not wait for the Bolivar to hit zero. They saw the trajectory and they acted. And that is what you need to do, right now, today. Not next week, not next month, today. And here's what you need to hold. You need physical silver. You need physical gold. You do not need mining stocks. You do not need ETFs. You do not need futures contracts. You need metal in your hand, in your safe, in your possession. Because if it is in a bank, it is not yours. If it is in a vault, it is not yours. If it is in an ETF, it is not yours. It is a claim. It is a contract. It is a promise. And promises break. We just watched an entire country's banking system break. We just watched millions of people lose access to their money overnight. And you think your bank is different? You think your government is different? The math says otherwise. The history says otherwise. The pattern says otherwise. And the only way to protect yourself is to remove yourself from the system, to hold your wealth in a form that the government cannot confiscate, cannot freeze, cannot devalue with a keystroke. And that form is metal. It has been metal for 5,000 years. It is still metal today. It will be metal in 5,000 years from now. That is the final lesson. That is the smoking gun. That is the data. And if you ignore it, if you dismiss it, if you say, that will never happen here, you are gambling with your family's future. And the odds are not in your favor. Now I am going to tell you exactly what to do, because I am not just here to scare you. I am here to give you a plan. Step 1. Calculate your exposure. Look at your bank account. Look at your savings. Look at your cash. Add it up. That is your fiat exposure. That is the amount you are at risk of losing if your currency follows the same path as the Bolivar. Step 2. Decide your allocation. I am not a financial advisor. I cannot tell you what to do, but I can tell you what the families in Venezuela wish they had done. They wish they had converted 30%, 40%, 50% of their savings into silver and gold in 2021. Not 5%, not 10%, enough to survive, enough to rebuild. Step 3. Buy physical. Do not buy paper. Do not buy SLV. Do not buy GLD. Buy coins. Buy bars. Buy something you can touch. American Silver Eagles. Canadian Maple Leafs. Generic rounds. It does not matter. Just buy the metal. Step 4. Store it securely. Not in a bank, not in a safety deposit box, in your home, in a safe, buried, hidden. Somewhere only you know. Because if the system collapses, if the banks close, you need immediate access. You cannot wait for business hours. You cannot wait for permission. You need it now. Step 5. Tell no one. Do not brag. Do not show off. Do not post on social media. Operational security is critical. The families in Venezuela who survived are the ones who kept their mouths shut, the ones who did not advertise, the ones who were invisible. Be invisible. And finally, I need you to subscribe to this channel right now. Not because I need the subscribers, because you need the information. Because when the next domino falls, when the next currency collapses, when the contagion spreads, I am going to be here covering it in real time. I'm going to be showing you the data. I am going to be giving you the warning. And if you are not subscribed with notifications on, you are going to miss it. You are going to wake up one morning and see the headlines, and it will be too late. The dealers will be sold out. The premiums will be 500%, and you will be stuck. So do it now. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on the bell, because I do not know how long this channel stays up. I do not know when YouTube decides this content is too controversial and shuts it down. I do not know when the algorithm decides to bury me completely. But I know this. The information I am giving you is the information they do not want you to have. It is the information that exposes the lie. It is the information that threatens the system, and they will try to silence it. So you need to be plugged in, you need to be ready, you need to be part of the network. Because when the collapse comes, and it is coming, the people who survive are the people who saw it coming, the people who prepared, the people who moved into metal, just like the families in Venezuela, just like the families in Argentina, just like the families in Weimar, Germany, just like every family in history who lived through a currency collapse and came out the other side with their wealth intact. They all did the same thing. They held metal. And you need to do the same. Right now. Do not wait. Do not hesitate. Do not assume it will never happen, because it is happening. It happened in Venezuela 72 hours ago. It is happening in Turkey right now.